The first light of dawn had not yet touched the horizon when Marlo Sinclair pushed through the back door of Redwood Diner. The hinges screamed their familiar protest, a sound that had become as much a part of her morning routine as the coffee she would brew in exactly 7 minutes. March in Nashville carried a peculiar cold, the kind that seeped through jacket seams and settled in the bones, reminding you that winter had not quite finished its work. She flipped the switches in sequence, muscle memory guiding her hand. Overhead lights buzzed to life, revealing a space that looked exactly as it had when she'd locked up 12 hours earlier. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, their surfaces cracked from decades of elbows in coffee cups. The black and white checkered floor held the scuffs of 1,000 shuffling feet, stories written in worn linoleum that no amount of mopping could erase. Marley moved through the dining room with practiced efficiency, upturning chairs from tabletops, checking salt shakers, ensuring the sugar dispensers were full. Her hands knew this dance. They had performed it every morning for 3 years, ever since the night a drunk driver had crossed the center line on Highway 40 and turned her world into something unrecognizable. She paused at the corner booth, the one that faced both the door and the kitchen. A memory flickered unbidden. Her father sitting in this exact spot on her 16th birthday, sliding a small wrapped box across the table. Inside had been a silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny fork engraved with the words, "Home is where the food is." He had worked double shifts at the plant for 2 months to afford it. She still wore it hidden beneath the sleeve of her uniform, the metal warm against her wrist. The coffee maker gurgled to life, pulling her back to the present, 5:15. Quinn would be getting up soon, stumbling through their apartment with the graceless exhaustion of a 16-year-old who stayed up too late on his phone. She had texted him twice last night, reminders about the geometry test he claimed not to care about. He had not responded. That silence spoke volumes she did not want to interpret. The diner's back door opened again. Lenora Whitfield stepped inside, bringing with her the scent of lavender hand cream and the particular energy of a woman who had been waking at 4:30 for 40 years. She owned Redwood, had inherited it from her late husband, and ran it with the firm tenderness of someone who understood that a diner was never just about food. "Morning, honey," Lenora said, already tying her apron. Her silver hair was pulled back in its usual bun, not a strand out of place. "You look tired." "I'm fine, Miss Nora." "That's what you always say." Lenora moved to the grill, beginning her own morning routine. "Quinn doing okay?" "He's fine, too." "Another thing you always say." Marley did not respond. She pulled order pads from beneath the counter, checked that pens worked, arranged menus in their holder by the door. The routine absorbed her, required nothing but muscle and repetition. This was what she needed, work that did not ask questions. Work that did not require her to acknowledge the weight pressing down on her chest every time she thought about the stack of medical bills on her kitchen table, or the call from Quinn's vice principal about his declining attendance, or the fact that she was 25 years old and could not remember the last time she had thought about anything beyond survival. The first customers arrived at 6, regulars mostly, old men who gathered in the far booth and solved the world's problems over eggs and bacon. A young couple with a baby who never seemed to sleep, their eyes hollowed by exhaustion that Marley recognized. A woman in scrubs heading home from a night shift at the hospital who always ordered the same thing, black coffee and wheat toast dry. By 7, the breakfast rush had begun in earnest. Marley moved between tables with practiced grace, balancing plates and refilling coffee cups, her mind operating on autopilot. She smiled when appropriate, made small talk about the weather, remembered who took cream and who drank it black. The customers saw competence. They did not see the calculation happening behind her eyes, the constant mental math of tips versus bills, hours worked versus hours needed. At 7:45, the bell above the door chimed and Beckett Garrison walked in. He came every Wednesday, had for the past 6 months, though. Marley could not remember when exactly he had become a regular. Some people simply appeared one day and then kept appearing until their absence would seem strange. Beck was like that. Tall, somewhere in his 30s, with the kind of posture that suggested military training even in civilian clothes. He wore jeans and a canvas jacket, nothing remarkable, but he moved through space differently than other men, deliberately, as if he had learned to be aware of every angle, every exit, every potential threat. The dog came with him, always. Ranger was a Belgian Malinois, lean and alert, wearing a vest that identified him as a certified service animal. The dog's eyes tracked everything missing, nothing, but he never made a sound. He simply followed Beck to the corner booth, the same one every week, and settled beneath the table with his head on his paws watching. Beck never made a fuss. He nodded to Lenora, offered Marley a brief smile when she brought coffee, and then he sat quietly looking out the window at the street beyond. He did not read the newspaper like the other regulars, did not scroll through his phone. He just sat drinking coffee that he took, black, eating eggs and toast that he never left unfinished, existing in a silence that seemed both comfortable and necessary. Marley had learned not to interrupt that silence unnecessarily. She kept his coffee cup full, brought his food when it was ready, and otherwise left him alone. There was something about Beck that suggested he valued the quiet, that he had come to Redwood not for the food, but for the simple act of sitting in a place where no one expected anything from him. And this morning, when she refilled his cup for the second time, he looked up. "Thank you, Marley." The use of her name startled her. She had worn a name tag for 3 years, but most customers never noticed it. They called her sweetheart or honey, or simply snapped their fingers when they needed something. Beck had never done either. He had simply existed in his corner booth, a quiet presence she had learned to anticipate without thinking about it too hard. "You're welcome, Mr. Garrison." "Beck is fine." She nodded, unsure what else to say, and moved to the next table. But something about the exchange lingered, a small moment of recognition that felt disproportionately significant. Perhaps because so few people in her life actually saw her. Perhaps because she had become so accustomed to being invisible that even the smallest acknowledgement felt like being pulled into focus. The morning continued its predictable rhythm. Orders came in, food went out, the register chimed its mechanical song. Marley's feet ached. Her lower back had begun the familiar protest that would intensify as the day wore on, but she kept moving. There was no other choice. Stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant confronting questions she could not afford to answer. At 8:30, the bell above the door chimed again. The man who entered did not belong in Redwood. That much was immediately clear. His shoes alone probably cost more than Marley made in 2 weeks, Italian leather that clicked against the checkerboard floor with the confidence of someone who had never questioned whether he could afford to replace them. He wore dark jeans that fit too perfectly to be off the rack, and a sweater that looked casually expensive in the way that only genuinely expensive things could. His hair was styled with product that caught the overhead lights, and his watch reflected them back in sharp, precise glints. He did not wait to be seated. He walked directly to a booth near the center of the room, slid into it with the loose-limbed ease of someone who expected the world to accommodate him, and immediately pulled out his phone. Marley grabbed a menu and approached. "Good morning. Coffee to start." He did not look up. "Espresso, double shot." "We don't have an espresso machine. We have regular coffee." Or, "Then what the hell kind of restaurant is this?" He finally looked at her, his eyes traveling from her face down to her name tag and back up again with undisguised disdain. "Never mind, black coffee. And I want to see a menu with actual food, not whatever greasy spoon garbage you people usually serve." Marley's hand tightened on the menu. "This is what we have, sir." He snatched it from her, flipped through it with evident disgust, and tossed it onto the table. "Fine, I'll have the steak and eggs. Steak medium, rare eggs, over easy, no toast, and make sure the steak is actually edible. The last place I went to couldn't even manage that." "Yes, sir." She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "And tell whoever's cooking back there that if they screw this up, I'm not paying. I don't care what your policy is." Marley nodded without responding and walked to the kitchen. Her hands were shaking slightly as she clipped the order to the wheel, and she took a breath, forcing herself to calm down. Difficult customers were not new. She had dealt with them before. This was just another man who thought money gave him the right to treat people like furniture. She could handle it. Lenora glanced at the ticket and then at Marley's face. "That the guy in the fancy sweater?" "Yeah. Charming. I've had worse." "That doesn't mean you should have to," Lenora said quietly, but she turned to the grill without waiting for a response. Marley returned to her other tables, refilling coffee, clearing plates, maintaining the easy rhythm that kept Redwood running. But she was aware of the man in the center booth, of the way his voice carried every time he took a phone call, of the casual cruelty in his tone when he spoke to whoever was on the other end. She heard words like incompetent and pathetic and, "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Each phrase landed like a small stone thrown into still water, rippling outward, disturbing the morning's peace. Beck was still in his corner booth. Ranger had lifted his head ears forward, attention fixed on the man in the center of the room. The dog's body language had shifted, subtle but unmistakable to anyone who knew how to read it. Tension had entered his posture, a readiness that had not been there before. Beck's hand moved to rest on Ranger's head, a gentle touch that the dog responded to immediately. His ears relaxed slightly, though his gaze did not waver. Beck himself had gone still in the way that dangerous things often did before they moved. Marley had seen it before in her father, in the men he had worked with at the plant. men who knew violence intimately and had learned to hold it in check. She pushed the observation aside and focused on her work. 15 minutes later, she brought the steak and eggs to the center booth. The man who she now thought of only as the expensive sweater looked at the plate with the expression of someone who had been personally insulted. "This is medium rare." "Yes, sir. The cook prepared it exactly as you ordered." He cut into the steak, examined the pink center, and then dropped his fork with a clatter that made the couple in the next booth jump. "This is practically raw. I asked for medium rare, not bleeding on the plate. Take it back." Marley looked at the steak. It was, in fact, a perfect medium rare. She had watched Lenora cook it herself, had seen the care taken to get it exactly right. "Sir, this is— Are you arguing with me?" His voice had risen now loud enough that conversations at nearby tables faltered and died. "I'm telling you this is wrong and you're standing here arguing. What kind of service is this?" "I'm not arguing, sir. I just— Get your manager now." Marley's face burned, but she kept her expression neutral. "Of course." She found Lenora in the kitchen and explained in a low voice. Lenora wiped her hands on her apron, sighed, and walked out to the dining room. What followed was a performance Marley had witnessed before with other difficult customers. Lenora apologized with practiced grace, offered to remake the steak at no charge, suggested alternative menu. Items did everything a business owner could do to defuse a situation that should never have escalated in the first place. But the expensive sweater was not interested in resolution. He was interested in being right and being heard, in exercising the power that his money had taught him he possessed. "I don't want another steak," he said loud enough for the entire diner to hear. "I want to know why your staff can't take a simple order and get it right. I want to know why I'm being treated like this when I'm a paying customer. Do you know who my father is?" "Sir, I apologize for any inconvenience." "I don't want your apologies. I want compensation. This meal should be free, and your waitress should apologize properly, not stand there looking at me like I'm the problem." Lenora's voice remained calm, but Marley could see the tension in her shoulders. "I'll comp your meal, sir, but I need to ask that you lower your voice. You're disturbing the other customers." "Oh, I'm disturbing them." He laughed, the sound sharp and ugly. "That's rich. Maybe if you hired competent staff, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Marley stood frozen near the kitchen door, aware that every eye in the diner was on them now. The other customers watched with the uncomfortable fascination of people witnessing a car accident. No one intervened. No one said anything. They simply watched as people always did, waiting to see how far things would go before someone made them feel obligated to act. In his corner booth, Beck had gone completely still. Ranger was standing now, not moving from his position beneath the table, but clearly alert, clearly aware that something was wrong. Beck's hand remained on the dog's head, fingers buried in fur, but his gaze was fixed on the scene unfolding in the center of the room. Lenora was trying to end the confrontation, offering one final apology, one final attempt to satisfy a man who had decided that satisfaction was not the point. The point was domination. The point was making sure everyone in the room understood that he could make people bend, that he could cause a scene and face no consequences, that his money and his name insulated him from the basic requirement of human decency. "You know what?" the expensive sweater said, standing up now, his voice dripping with contempt. "Forget it. I'm not eating here. I'm not paying for this garbage. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of place this is." He pulled out his phone, held it up, and Marley realized with a sick jolt that he had been recording. How long, she did not know, but he had been recording, capturing Lenora's apologies, capturing the moment, building his narrative. "Sir, please," Lenora began. "Get out of my way." He pushed past her, not violently, but with enough force to make her stumble back a step. Marley moved instinctively, putting herself between him and the door, though she had no idea what she intended to do. "Please, sir, if you would just move." She did not move, could not move. Some stubborn part of her, the part that had kept her upright through 3 years of grief and exhaustion and endless, grinding work, refused to step aside, refused to let him leave without at least attempting to salvage something from this humiliation. His hand shot out, gripping her upper arm hard enough to bruise. "I said move." Time seemed to slow and speed up simultaneously. She saw his face close enough now to smell the expensive cologne, to see the anger in his eyes that had nothing to do with a steak and everything to do with someone daring to exist in his path. She saw Lenora's shocked expression, saw the other customers frozen in their booths, phones out, now everyone recording, everyone watching, no one helping. And then his other hand was on the back of her head, fingers tangling in her hair, and he was pushing her down, forcing her face toward the table he had just vacated. The edge of the table caught her cheekbone, a bright explosion of pain. Her hands hit the surface, scattering the plate, the fork, the glass of water that fell and shattered on the floor. She felt the food smear across her cheek, felt the humiliation burn hotter than the pain, felt something inside her crack in a way that had nothing to do with her body and everything to do with her spirit. This was it. This was the moment when everything broke. Someone was screaming, maybe her, maybe Lenora, maybe one of the customers. She could not tell. All she could hear was the rushing in her ears, the sound of her own breath, harsh and ragged, the sound of her name being called from somewhere far away. And then the pressure on her head was gone. She lifted her face, blinking away tears she had not realized were falling, and saw the expensive sweater stumbling backward. Saw Beck standing between them, not touching the other man, but radiating a presence so intense it seemed to occupy physical space. Ranger was beside him, alert, but controlled, positioned in a way that blocked the path to the door without appearing aggressive. Beck's voice when he spoke was quiet, conversational almost, but it carried through the sudden silence like a blade through water. "Sir, you need to let her go." The expensive sweater regained his balance, his face flushing with rage. "And what are you going to do about it, old man? This is none of your business. That waitress was—" "I know what she was doing," Beck said, still in that same quiet voice. "She was trying to do her job, and you assaulted her in front of a room full of witnesses. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit down, you're going to wait for the police to arrive, and you're going to answer for what you just did. You have no idea who you're talking to." "I know exactly who I'm talking to. Someone who thinks money means consequences don't apply. But you're wrong." The expensive sweater laughed, the sound brittle and vicious. "You threatening me? You and your dog, do you know who my father is? Do you have any concept of what I can do to you? To this place I will bury you. I will bury all of you." Beck did not respond. He simply stood there in unmovable presence, and Marley saw something she had not expected to see. The expensive sweater was afraid. It showed in the tightness around his eyes, in the way his hands had curled into fists, in the slight backward lean of his body, as if he wanted to retreat but could not make himself do it. Ranger had not moved. The dog remained in position, his gaze fixed on the expensive sweater, with an intensity that suggested he was reading every micro-expression, every shift in body language, cataloging threats and calculating responses with the trained precision of a working canine. "You can't keep me here," the expensive sweater said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "This is illegal detainment. I'll sue you for everything you have." "You're free to leave," Beck said. "But if you do, I'll make sure every person in this room sends their video to the police. And I'll make sure your name is attached to every single one. So yes, you can walk out right now, but you'll still answer for this. The only question is whether you do it on your terms or someone else's." The standoff stretched. Seconds passed heavy with tension, and Marley realized she was holding her breath. Her face throbbed where it had hit the table. Her arm ached where he had gripped it. But she could not look away from the scene playing out in front of her, this quiet confrontation between a man who had learned that violence could be controlled and a man who had never learned that lesson at all. Finally, the expensive sweater broke. He pulled out his wallet, yanked a $100 bill from it, and threw it on the floor. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice shaking now with rage or fear or some combination of both. "All of you, you have no idea what you've just done." He turned and walked to the door, yanked it open, hard enough that the bell clanged violently and disappeared into the morning. Through the window, Marley watched him get into a silver Mercedes AMG, slam the door, and peel out of the parking lot with enough speed to leave rubber marks on the asphalt. The diner remained silent. Slowly, as if waking from a shared dream, the customers began to move again. Someone murmured something. Someone else pulled out their phone to replay the video they had captured. The couple with the baby gathered their things and left quickly, not making eye contact with anyone. The old men in the far booth sat frozen, their breakfast cooling in front of them. Marley became aware that she was shaking. Her whole body trembled, fine tremors that she could not control. She put her hand on the nearest table to steady herself, felt the solid wood beneath her palm, but it did not help. The world had tilted somehow, and she could not find her balance. Lenora was beside her suddenly, hands on her shoulders, voice low and urgent. "Honey, are you okay? Did he hurt you? Let me see your face." "I'm fine," Marley heard herself say, though the words felt like they were coming from someone else. "I'm okay." "You're not okay. Sit down. We need to call the police. We need to, but no." The word came out sharper than she intended. "No police. Please, I need a minute." Lenora looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Marley's face stopped her. Instead, she just nodded, squeezed Marley's shoulders gently, and stepped back. Beck had returned to his corner booth. Ranger had settled back beneath the table, though the dog's attention remained focused on Marley, his dark eyes tracking her every movement. Beck sat down, picked up his coffee cup, and took a sip as if nothing had happened. As if he had not just intervened in a situation that could have become much worse. As if he did this every Wednesday morning. But when Marley looked at him, really looked at him, she saw that his hand was shaking slightly. Just enough to make the coffee ripple in the cup. Just enough to suggest that the calm he projected was not quite as complete as it appeared. Their eyes met across the diner. Beck set down his cup and stood. He crossed the room slowly. Ranger following at his heel and stopped a respectful distance away. Close enough to speak quietly, far enough that Marley did not feel crowded. "You okay, Marley?" The question, simple and direct, broke something in her. She felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of the customers who were still watching, still recording, still turning this into content for their feeds. "I'm fine," she managed. "That's not what I asked." She looked at him, then really looked, and saw something in his face that she had not expected. Understanding. Not pity, which she would have hated, but genuine understanding of what it felt like to have your dignity stripped away in public, to be made small by someone who wielded power without conscience. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just someone who's seen too many people get hurt when no one steps up." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. You didn't need rescuing. You were handling it. I just made sure it didn't go further than it already had." But that was not true, and they both knew it. She had been drowning, and he had thrown her a line. The fact that he did not want credit for it made it somehow more meaningful. Beck reached into his jacket and pulled out a card, plain white with just a name and a phone number. "If anyone gives you trouble about this, if that guy comes back, or if his lawyers show up, or if anything happens that you need help with, call me." She took the card, stared at the number printed there. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." "I know enough." He turned to go, then paused and looked back. "That guy, the one who just left, he's done this before. I can see it. Men like that don't learn to treat people that way overnight. They practice, they get away with it, and they keep doing it until someone makes them stop. So don't let him make you feel like you did anything wrong. You didn't. He did. And if there's any justice in this world, he'll answer for it." Beck walked back to his booth, left money on the table that was probably twice what his meal cost, and headed for the door. Ranger followed, perfectly positioned at his handler's left side, and together they stepped out into the morning. Marley stood in the center of Redwood Diner, surrounded by customers who were already texting their friends, already posting videos, already turning her worst moment into entertainment. Her face throbbed, her arm ached, her hands would not stop shaking, but she was still standing, and somehow impossibly that felt like it mattered. Outside in the parking lot of Redwood Diner, Callahan Ashford sat in his Mercedes, hands gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make his knuckles white. His phone was already dialing, the call connecting before the first ring finished. "Dad," he said when Sterling Ashford answered, his voice tight with barely controlled rage, "I need the lawyers. Now. Some homeless vet just assaulted me at a diner, threatened me with his attack dog. I want him destroyed. I want that place shut down. I want all of them to pay for this." He did not mention the waitress he had grabbed. Did not mention the way he had forced her head down onto the table. Did not mention that he had started the confrontation, escalated, it turned it into something that could never be taken back. In his version of events, he was the victim. And in his world, that was the version that would matter. The call ended. Callahan threw his phone onto the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove away from Redwood Diner without looking back. He did not see the cameras that had captured everything. Did not see the witnesses uploading videos in real time. Did not see the digital evidence spreading across the internet like wildfire, each share and retweet building a narrative that would be much harder to control than he imagined. All he saw was his own rage, his own humiliation, his own certainty that he would make them all pay. And in that moment, staring at the road ahead with eyes that saw only what he wanted to see, Callahan Ashford set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. For him, for Marley, for Beck, for everyone who had been in that diner on an ordinary Wednesday morning in March, when the world tilted and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The video went live at 9:47 that morning. Marley did not see it happen. She was in the bathroom of Redwood Diner, washing her face with cold water that stung against the scrape on her cheekbone. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman she barely recognized, dark circles under her eyes, a bruise already forming where her face had hit the table, hair that had come loose from its ponytail during the struggle. She looked exactly how she felt, broken. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, once, then again. Then in rapid succession, a cascade of notifications that did not stop. She pulled it out, saw the screen filling with messages, and felt her stomach drop. The first text was from Quinn. 3 words. What the hell? Followed by a link. She clicked it, watched her own assault play out on a screen 6 inches wide. Someone had filmed it. Multiple people actually from multiple angles. But this version, the one already racking up views with terrifying speed, had been edited, cut, manipulated. It started with her blocking Callahan's path to the door. It showed her refusing to move. Then it jumped forward, skipping the part where he grabbed her, where he forced her head down, where she had felt her dignity shatter along with the water glass. Instead, it showed Beck approaching, showed Ranger standing alert and focused, showed what could be interpreted, if you wanted to interpret it that way, as a veteran and his dog threatening a customer over a minor complaint. The caption read, "Homeless vet attacks paying customer with attack dog. This is what happens when we don't take care of our mental health crisis." 600,000 views in 30 minutes. And climbing. Marley's hands started shaking again. She dropped the phone, watched it clatter against the sink, and had to grip the edge of the counter to keep herself upright. This could not be happening. This was not real. But her phone kept buzzing, kept lighting up with notifications, with messages from people she had not spoken to in years, with strangers who had somehow found her profile and wanted to share their opinions about what kind of person she must be. Someone knocked on the bathroom door. Marley, Lenora's voice gentle but insistent. "Honey, we need to talk." She opened the door. Lenora stood there with her phone in hand, her face grave. "You've seen it." "I've seen it. It's not the full video. Someone cut it, made it look like—" "I know what they made it look like," Lenora said, "and that's the problem. The truth doesn't matter nearly as much as the story people want to believe. And right now, the story they want to believe is that a veteran with PTSD attacked a wealthy young man for no reason. But that's not what happened. I know that, you know that. Everyone in this diner knows that. But the internet doesn't care about what actually happened. It cares about what generates clicks." Marley felt something cold settle in her chest. "What are you saying?" Lenora took a breath, and in that pause, Marley already knew. "I got a call from a law firm. Ashford and Partners. They represent Callahan's father, Sterling Ashford. They're threatening to sue for damages. $2 million. They're claiming assault, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. They're saying the video proves their case. The edited video. Any video they choose to use. And they have lawyers, Marley, the kind of lawyers who don't lose. They've given me 48 hours to close the diner voluntarily, or they'll file the lawsuit and make sure it drags out so long I'll have to close anyway." The bathroom suddenly felt too small. The walls pressed in, the fluorescent light hummed too loud, and Marley could not get enough air into her lungs. "You're closing." "I don't have a choice. Because of me." "Because of him," Lenora corrected firmly. "Because of what he did. Because his father has enough money and power to rewrite reality. None of this is your fault, honey, but I need you to understand something. When they file that lawsuit, they're going to come after everyone. Me, you, that veteran who stepped in. They're going to try to destroy all of us to protect their son. And I can't put you through that." The words hung between them, and Marley understood what Lenora was not quite saying. "You're firing me. I'm trying to protect you. If you're not employed here anymore, they can't come after you as easily. It gives you distance, deniability. I was the one he attacked, which means you're the one they'll target hardest. They'll dig into your life, your finances, your family. They'll find every mistake you've ever made and use it against you. They'll paint you as someone who provoked their son, who caused the whole situation, who's just trying to get a payout. And I can't protect you from that." Marley heard the truth in it, heard the fear, but she also heard the resignation, the quiet acceptance that some battles could not be won because the other side had already rigged the game. "What about Beck? The man who helped me? I don't know. I don't even know his last name. But if that video keeps spreading, if the Ashfords decide to make an example of him, I imagine he'll have his own problems soon enough." Lenora reached out, squeezed Marley's hand once, and then turned and walked back into the dining room. Marley stood alone in the bathroom, staring at her reflection, at the woman who had just lost her job and her safety, and possibly any chance at justice, all because she had tried to do her work with dignity. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Quinn. People at school are sharing it. They're saying you're lying about what happened. Come home. She walked back into the dining room, untied her apron with hands that had finally stopped shaking, and set it on the counter. The few remaining customers watched her with the uncomfortable fascination of people who knew they were witnessing something significant, but did not want to get involved. She did not blame them. She understood. Survival meant knowing when to look away. She left through the back door, the same door she had entered 7 hours earlier when the morning had still held the ordinary promise of an ordinary day. The March air felt colder now, or maybe she just felt it more. Her car was parked at the far end of the lot, a 15-year-old Honda with a check engine light that had been on for 6 months. She got in, started the engine, and sat there for a long moment, not sure where to go or what to do next. The card Beck had given her was still in her pocket. She pulled it out, stared at the phone number, then slipped it back. There would be time for that conversation later. Right now, she needed to face Quinn. By the time Marley pulled into the parking lot of her apartment complex, the video had reached 8 million views. The comments section had become a battleground between people defending her and people convinced she was lying. Hashtags had formed. Hashtag Justice for Cal and hashtag Believe Service Workers were trending simultaneously, two opposing narratives fighting for dominance in the court of public opinion. She climbed the stairs to the third-floor apartment she shared with Quinn, each step feeling like it required more energy than the last. The door was unlocked. Quinn sat on the couch and his laptop open, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. "They're saying terrible things about you," he said without looking up. "I know. They're saying you provoked him, that you were rude, that you refused to move when he asked politely. That's not what happened. I know that, but they don't care." He finally looked at her and she saw fear in his eyes. 16 years old and already learning that the truth mattered less than the story. "They found your Facebook. They're posting photos, making fun of your clothes, saying you're trailer trash trying to scam a rich family." Marley sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Let them talk. They're talking about me too, about mom and dad. Someone found the obituary. They're saying you're probably just looking for a payout because you're desperate. "Are you okay?" Quinn laughed to sound bitter. "Am I okay, Marley? People at school won't even look at me. They think you're lying. They think you're trying to ruin some guy's life because you're broke and angry. How am I supposed to be okay with that?" "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. Just tell me what you're going to do." She did not have an answer. The stack of bills on the kitchen table had grown taller over the past month. Medical debt from her father's final hospital stay. Student loans from the year of college she had managed before everything fell apart. Quinn's school fees. The rent, always the rent, creeping higher each year while her wages stayed frozen. She had been living on the edge of financial collapse for 3 years. One unexpected expense away from losing everything. And now she had lost her job. "I don't know," she said finally. "I honestly don't know." Her phone rang, a number she did not recognize. She answered. "Miss Sinclair, this is Detective Sarah Morrison with the Nashville Police Department. I'm calling about an incident that occurred this morning at Redwood Diner. We've received multiple reports and would like to get your statement. Would you be available to come down to the station?" Relief flooded through her. Someone official, someone who could help. Yes, I can come right now. "Actually, we'd prefer to do this tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Ask for me at the front desk. And Miss Sinclair, don't talk to anyone about this case until after we've spoken. No social media posts, no interviews, nothing. Do you understand?" "I understand." The call ended. Marley set the phone down and allowed herself the smallest moment of hope. The police were involved now. They would see the full video. They would understand what actually happened. They would make this right. Quinn was watching her. "What did they say?" "They want my statement tomorrow morning." "That's good, right?" "I think so. I hope so." That night, Marley lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the apartment complex settling around her. A television played too loud somewhere below. A couple argued in Spanish in the unit next door. A car alarm went off in the parking lot, and no one bothered to silence it for 20 minutes. She thought about her parents, about the way her father used to come home from his shifts at the plant, exhausted but still willing to help her with her homework. About her mother's laugh, bright and unexpected, lighting up their small kitchen. About the last time she had felt truly safe, truly certain that the world made sense and that hard work and honesty would be enough. That certainty had died with them on Highway 40. And now, lying in the dark with her face still aching and her future crumbling, she wondered if she had been naive to think it could ever be recovered. Her phone lit up on the nightstand. another notification, another stranger weighing in on her life. She turned it face down and closed her eyes, but sleep did not come. Beckett Garrison's cabin sat 15 miles outside Nashville, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that most people missed even when they were looking for it. The isolation was intentional. After he had come home from his last deployment, after the evaluations and the diagnoses and the well-meaning suggestions that he seek community and connection, Beck had realized that what he needed most was distance. From people, from noise, from the constant pressure to be okay when he very clearly was not. The cabin had belonged to his grandfather, a Korean War veteran, who had understood without being told why Beck needed a place where no one would ask questions. He had left it to Beck in his will, along with a note that said simply, "Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is give yourself permission to be broken for a while." Beck had been broken for 6 years. Ranger knew it. The dog had been assigned to him 3 years ago through a veteran service program trained specifically to work with handlers dealing with PTSD. Ranger could sense the signs before Beck himself recognized them. The tightening in his chest, the way his breath would catch. The moments when the present dissolved and he was back overseas watching his friend die because Beck had not moved fast enough, had not seen the threat, had not been good enough, not been good. When those moments came, Ranger would press against Beck's leg, a solid weight that anchored him to the here and now. Sometimes it was enough, sometimes it was not. But the dog never gave up, never showed frustration, never made Beck feel like a burden. Tonight, Ranger was restless. The dog paced from the door to the couch and back again, his attention divided between Beck and something outside that Beck could not see. Beck sat in the armchair by the window, a cup of coffee cooling on the table beside him, and watched Ranger with the particular focus that came from years of trusting the dog's instincts more than his own. "What is it, boy?" Ranger paused, looked at Beck, then returned to the door. Beck stood crossed to the window and looked out into the darkness. The woods pressed close around the cabin, familiar shapes made strange by shadow. He saw nothing out of place, no headlights on the road, no movement in the trees. But Ranger was alert in a way that meant something had changed, even if Beck could not identify what. His phone rang. He checked the screen, saw an unknown number, and almost did not answer. But something made him pick up. "Beckett Garrison." "Who's asking?" "My name is Sloan Brennan. I'm an attorney here in Nashville. I represent veterans dealing with legal issues, and I think you're going to need my services very soon." Beck's hand tightened on the phone. "I haven't done anything illegal." "I know. I watched the video, the real one, not the edited version that's going viral. I also know that the family of the man you confronted this morning has significant legal resources and a history of using them to destroy anyone who gets in their way. They've already issued cease and desist orders to the diner. They're preparing to file charges against you for assault and intimidation. I didn't touch him. I know. But they'll argue that you threatened him with your dog, that you created a hostile situation, that you used your military training to intimidate a civilian, and they'll use your PTSD diagnosis against you." Beck felt ice spread through his chest. "How do you know about that?" "Because I've dealt with the Ashford family before. They have investigators. They dig. And they use whatever they find to build a narrative that serves their interests. Right now, you're about to become the dangerous veteran who can't control himself. The liability, the threat to public safety. Why are you calling me?" "Because I don't like bullies, and because I made the mistake of staying silent the last time the Ashfords came after someone. I won't make that mistake again." Silence stretched between them. Beck looked at Ranger, who had finally settled near the door. His body relaxed, but his eyes still watchful. "What do you want from me?" "I want to represent you. Pro bono. I want to make sure that when they come after you, and they will, you're not facing it alone. I want to make sure the truth actually comes out." "And what do you get out of this?" Sloane's laugh was quiet and bitter. "Redemption, maybe, or just the satisfaction of watching Sterling Ashford lose for once. Does it matter?" Beck thought about the waitress in the diner, Marley. The way she had looked when that man forced her head down onto the table. The way she had trembled afterward, trying so hard to hold herself together. The way everyone else had just watched, recorded, done nothing. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll text you an address." 10 o'clock. And Mr. Garrison, don't talk to anyone about this. Don't post anything on social media. Don't engage with the videos or the comments. Just come to my office and we'll figure out how to fight this." The call ended. Beck set the phone down and looked at Ranger. "Looks like we're in for a fight, boy." Ranger's tail thumped once against the floor. "Agreement. Or maybe just acknowledgement that wherever Beck went, whatever happened next, they would face it together. Beck did not sleep that night. He sat in his chair watching the darkness gradually give way to dawn, thinking about choices and consequences, and the strange way that doing the right thing often came with a cost that felt disproportionate to the action itself. He had stepped in to help a stranger. Now his life was about to be torn apart because of it. But even knowing that, even understanding what was coming, he could not bring himself to regret it. Because the alternative, standing by and doing nothing while someone was hurt, was not something he could live with. He had tried that once before, had hesitated for a fraction of a second too long, had watched his friend die because Beck had not been fast enough. He would not make that mistake again. At 8 in the morning, Marley walked into the Nashville Police Department and asked for Detective Morrison. She was led to a small interview room with cinder block walls and fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly unreal. Morrison arrived 5 minutes later, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a firm handshake. "Thank you for coming in, Miss Sinclair. I know this has been a difficult time. I just want to tell the truth about what happened. And I want to hear it. But first, I need you to understand something. The man who assaulted you, Callahan Ashford, comes from a very prominent family. His father has significant influence in this city. That doesn't mean we won't pursue this case, but it does mean it's going to be complicated." Marley felt something sink in her chest. "You're saying they're going to get away with it?" "I'm saying that justice and the legal system don't always align the way we'd like them to. But I'm going to do everything I can to make sure your statement is on record, that the evidence is preserved, and that this case is handled properly." Okay. It was not okay. None of this was okay. But Marley nodded and began to speak. She told Morrison everything: the escalation, the threats, the moment when Callahan grabbed her, the way it had felt when he forced her head down, the intervention from Beck, the aftermath. She spoke for 45 minutes, her voice steady, even when the memories made her want to cry, and Morrison recorded every word. When she finished, Morrison set down her pen. "I believe you, Miss Sinclair, and I'm going to submit this report with a recommendation for charges. But I need you to prepare yourself for the possibility that the district attorney's office may not pursue it. The Ashfords have lawyers, good ones, and they've already started building a counter-narrative." The edited video. "Among other things, they're arguing that you blocked Mr. Ashford's exit, that you created a confrontation, that you were the aggressor. And they're threatening to press charges against the veteran who intervened. But he saved me." "I know, but the law doesn't always see things the way we do. All I can promise is that I'll fight for this case, that I'll make sure your voice is heard. Beyond that, I can't control what happens." Marley stood, shook Morrison's hand, and walked out of the police station into a morning that felt colder than it should have. She checked her phone. 14 million views. The edited video had been picked up by news outlets. People were calling for Beck's arrest, calling for the diner to be shut down, calling for Marley to be investigated for fraud. The truth was buried under an avalanche of lies, and she had no idea how to dig it out. She was halfway to her car when she saw him. Garrett Holloway stood near the parking lot entrance, his hands shoved in his pockets, his expression uncertain. The construction worker who had been in the diner that morning, who had watched everything happen. "Mr. Holloway." "Miss Sinclair, I needed to talk to you. Can we go somewhere private?" They sat in her car, the engine running for heat, and Garrett pulled a USB drive from his pocket. "I recorded the whole thing, the real version, no edits. Everything from the moment that guy walked in to the moment he left. And I've been carrying this around for a day, trying to decide what to do with it." Marley stared at the small plastic rectangle. "Why didn't you give it to the police?" "Because I'm scared," Garrett said simply. "I've got 3 kids. I work construction for a company that does contracts with Ashford Properties. If I come forward with this, if I testify, I lose my job. Maybe worse. These people don't play fair, Miss Sinclair. They destroy anyone who gets in their way." "Then why are you here?" He looked at her, and she saw the war playing out behind his eyes. Fear versus conscience. Survival versus justice. "Because you tried to stand up for yourself, and they crushed you for it. Because that veteran put himself at risk to help you, and now they're destroying him too. Because I've got 3 daughters, and I don't want them growing up in a world where this is just how things work. Where powerful people can do whatever they want, and the rest of us just have to take it." He pressed the USB drive into her hand. "This is everything. Give it to the police. Give it to the press. Use it however you need to. But understand that once you do, the Ashfords are going to come after everyone, including me, including my family. And I can't promise I'll be brave enough to see it through when they do. You don't have to do this. Yeah, I do. Because if I don't, I'll have to live with knowing I could have helped and I chose not to. And I don't think I can carry that. He got out of the car before she could respond, walked to his truck, and drove away. Marley sat there holding the USB drive, this small piece of plastic that contained the truth, and felt the weight of what it meant. Evidence, proof, vindication, and a target on everyone who tried to use it. She thought about Quinn, about the bills on her table, about the fragile stability she had built over 3 years of grinding work, about how easily it could all come crashing down. Then she thought about Beck sitting in his corner booth every Wednesday asking for nothing more than coffee and quiet. About Lenora, who had given her a job when she desperately needed one. About Garrett, who had 3 daughters and a conscience that would not let him stay silent. She started the car and entered the address Sloan Brennan had texted to Beck into her GPS, because maybe she could not win. But she could at least try. Sloan's office was a converted brownstone in East Nashville, the kind of place that looked like it might once have been someone's home before becoming a testament to late nights in impossible cases. Marley climbed the steps and rang the bell. The woman who answered was younger than Marley had expected, blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, wearing a suit that looked expensive, but lived in. "Miss Sinclair, come in." Beck was already there sitting in a chair near the window with Ranger at his feet. He stood when Marley entered, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Two people who had been strangers 48 hours ago and were now bound together by circumstance and consequence. "You okay?" he asked. "No," she said honestly, "but I have something that might help." She held up the USB drive. Sloan took it, plugged it into her laptop, and they watched in silence as the truth played out on screen. The full video, unedited, undeniable. When it finished, Sloan sat back in her chair. "This changes everything. With this, we can prove assault. We can prove that the edited video was deliberately misleading. We can make a case that will actually hold up in court." But Marley heard the word that Sloan had not spoken. "But the moment we use this, the Ashfords will escalate. They'll go after Mr. Holloway. They'll dig into your lives. They'll use every resource they have to discredit this evidence and everyone associated with it. This doesn't make things easier. It makes them harder, because now they'll have to fight instead of just intimidate." Beck spoke for the first time. "How many others has he done this to?" Sloan looked at him. "What, Callahan Ashford? How many other people has he assaulted because someone doesn't get that comfortable with violence overnight? He's done it before." "I don't know." "Then we find out, because if we can prove a pattern, if we can show that this wasn't an isolated incident, we build a case they can't just pay away." Marley watched understanding dawn on Sloan's face. "You want to find his other victims. I want to make sure this means something. That it's not just about one moment in one diner. That we actually stop him from doing it again." Sloan stood paced to the window, looked out at the street below. "That's going to take time, investigation, resources, and every day we spend building that case is another day the Ashfords spend building their narrative. They're already ahead of us. They've already poisoned public opinion. If we wait too long, it won't matter what the truth is." "So we don't wait," Marley said. "We release the video, we make the truth public, and then we find the others." "That's incredibly risky." "Everything about this is risky, but doing nothing guarantees we lose." Sloan turned back to face them, and Marley saw something shift in her expression, a decision being made, a line being crossed. "Okay, we released the video. I'll get it to the press, to social media, everywhere the edited version spread. And while that's happening, I start digging into Callahan's past. But you both need to understand what you're signing up for. The Ashfords won't just sue. They'll destroy. They'll go after your reputations, your finances, everything you care about. And I can't protect you from all of it." Beck looked at Marley. Marley looked back. And in that moment, without words, they made an agreement. They had already lost too much to walk away now. "Do it," Marley said. Sloan nodded, picked up her phone, and started making calls. Over the next 3 hours, while Marley prepared mentally for what was coming, and Beck coordinated with veteran advocacy groups that had started reaching out in support, Sloan worked her network. She called every criminal defense attorney she knew in Nashville, every prosecutor, every legal aid organization. She asked the same question over and over. "Have you heard of anyone else who had a problem with Callahan Ashford?" By noon, she had 2 names: Finley Morrison, a restaurant worker who had been assaulted in 2022 by a broken wrist, paid $10,000 to stay quiet. Bryn Sullivan, a bartender who had been assaulted in 2023, cigarette burns on her forearm, paid $15,000 for silence. 2 confirmed victims, possibly more, and a pattern that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Sloan looked at Marley and Beck, her expression grim but determined. I'm going to reach out to them, see if they'll talk. If they're willing to come forward, we can break the ND, as under pattern and practice. We can show this wasn't just about you, it was systemic. And if they won't, Marley asked, then we fight with what we have. But either way, we fight. The unedited video dropped at 3:15 that afternoon, uploaded simultaneously to 6 different platforms. Within 20 minutes, it had been viewed 500,000 times. Within an hour, the number had quadrupled. The narrative began to shift. Marley watched it happen from Sloan's office, her phone lighting up again, but this time with different messages. Apologies, support, anger directed at the right target, but the relief she had expected never came. Because she knew what happened next. The Ashfords would strike back. And when they did, no one would be safe. The call came at 6:30 the following morning, shattering what little sleep Marley had managed to find. She fumbled for her phone in the darkness, saw Sloan's name on the screen, and knew before answering that something had shifted. They're moving fast, Sloan said without preamble. Sterling Ashford held a press conference 20 minutes ago. He's claiming the unedited video is a deepfake, that we're running a coordinated smear campaign against his family, and that he's filing criminal charges against everyone involved, including you. Marley sat up, her heart hammering. On what grounds? Extortion, conspiracy, defamation. It doesn't matter if the charges stick. The goal is to bury us in legal proceedings until we run out of money or will. He's also leaked your financial records to friendly media outlets. By this afternoon, everyone will know about your medical debt, your student loans, the eviction notice you received 2 years ago. The room tilted. Marley had fought so hard to keep that eviction quiet, had borrowed money from people she could barely afford to repay, had worked herself to exhaustion to avoid losing the apartment Quinn needed for stability. Now it would be used as evidence of her desperation, proof that she had engineered everything for a payout. How did they get my financial records? The same way they get everything. Money buys access, and they have more money than God. Sloan's voice softened slightly. I'm sorry, Marley. I warned you they would come after everything you care about. But knowing it's coming doesn't make it easier when it arrives. What about Finley and Bryn? Did they agree to talk? Finley called me last night. She's terrified, but she's willing to give a statement. Bryn is still deciding, and I found a third victim who won't come forward publicly, but confirm the pattern off the record. We have enough to build a case, but it's going to get worse before it gets better. How much worse? Beck was arrested an hour ago. They charged him with assault with a dangerous weapon, meaning Ranger. The judge set bail at $100,000. Marley closed her eyes. Of course they had. Beck had become the easiest target, the veteran whose PTSD diagnosis could be weaponized, whose protective instinct could be reframed as violence. She thought of him sitting in a cell right now, separated from Ranger, facing charges for the simple act of helping someone in need. Can you get him out? I'm working on it. But Marley, I need you to prepare yourself. The trial is going to be brutal. They're going to put your entire life on display. Every mistake, every moment of vulnerability, every choice you made out of desperation rather than strength. They're going to make you into a villain, and there's only so much I can do to stop it. I understand. Do you? Because once this starts, there's no walking it back. You could still take a settlement. Sterling made another offer last night. $200,000 split between you and the diner. All charges dropped. You just have to sign an NDA and disappear. Marley thought about that number, $200,000, more money than she had ever imagined having. Enough to pay off every debt, to send Quinn to any college he wanted, to finally stop living on the knife's edge of financial catastrophe. All she had to do was let Callahan Ashford walk away unpunished. All she had to do was tell every future victim that their pain mattered less than her comfort. No, she said, we fight. Sloan was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, get it dressed. We have a lot of work to do. By 8 o'clock, Marley stood outside the bail bondsman's office with Sloan, waiting for Beck to be processed out. The morning was cold, the kind of cold that suggested winter had not quite finished with Nashville, despite the calendar insisting it was spring. Pedestrians hurried past with their heads down, rushing toward warmth and coffee and ordinary concerns that did not include legal battles against billionaire families. Beck emerged 20 minutes later, looking exactly as he had 2 days ago, except for the exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. He carried nothing, had been allowed to bring nothing, and the first thing he did was scan the parking lot. Where's Ranger? Animal Control, Sloan said gently. They classified him as evidence. I'm filing an emergency motion to get him released, but it might take a few days. Something flickered across Beck's face, pain quickly suppressed. Ranger was not just a dog. He was Beck's anchor, his early warning system, the living creature who understood his demons without judgment. Separating them was not just cruel, it was calculated, designed to destabilize Beck before the trial even began. "We'll get him back," Marley said. Beck looked at her, really looked, and she saw the question in his eyes. "Why are you still here? Why are you still fighting when you could walk away?" She did not have a good answer except the truth, because walking away felt like dying in a way that fighting did not. They drove to Sloane's office in silence. Inside, Finley Morrison was already waiting, perched on the edge of a chair, with the nervous energy of someone who had spent the night second-guessing every choice that brought her to this moment. She was 29, wearing a server's uniform from the restaurant where she now worked, and when she saw Marley, something in her expression cracked. "You're really doing this," Finley said. "Fighting them." "Yes, even though they'll destroy you for it, especially because of that. Because if we don't fight, they'll just keep doing this to other people." Finley nodded slowly, then pulled an envelope from her purse. "I brought everything. Medical records from when he broke my wrist, photos I took of the bruises, the NDA they made me sign, and a list of 3 other women who worked at the same restaurant who all quit within a month of Callahan becoming a regular. I don't know if he hurt them too, but the pattern was there." Sloane took the envelope with the careful reverence of someone handling evidence that could change everything. "This is incredibly brave, Finley. I know what it cost you to bring this. I didn't do it for bravery. I did it because I'm tired of being scared. Tired of waking up every morning knowing I chose money over justice and hating myself for it." She looked at Beck. "You didn't even know her and you stepped in. You risked everything. If you can do that for a stranger, I can at least tell the truth about what happened to me." Beck's voice was quiet. "Thank you." The door opened again and Bryn Sullivan walked in. She was younger than Finley, only 24, with red hair pulled back in a tight bun and a defiance set to her jaw that suggested she had decided fear was a luxury she could no longer afford. She did not sit down, did not make small talk. She simply pulled up her sleeve and showed them the scars. "He did this at a private party, held a lit cigarette to my arm while his friends laughed. Said it was a joke that I couldn't take a joke. Then his father's lawyer showed up with $15,000 and a speech about how hard it would be for a young woman with a drug charge on her record to find work if she made trouble." "Drug charge?" Sloane asked carefully. "Possession of marijuana. 2 grams. I was 18. It got expunged, but they knew about it, knew how to use it as leverage." Bryn finally sat down, her hands shaking slightly. "I took the money because I was terrified and broke and convinced that no one would believe me anyway. I've regretted it every single day since." Sloane laid out her legal pad. "I need to record your statements, both of you. Everything you remember about the assaults, the aftermath, the settlements. It's going to be difficult, and the Ashford lawyers will try to discredit every word. But if you're willing to testify, we can establish a pattern that makes their defense almost impossible." "When?" Finley asked. "The preliminary hearing is in 5 days. If the judge allows it, we'll introduce your testimony as evidence of prior bad acts. It's a long shot, but it's the best chance we have." For the next 4 hours, Sloane recorded statements while Marley and Beck sat in the small waiting area, existing in a strange bubble of shared exhaustion. Neither spoke much. There was not much to say that had not already been said through action and choice. At noon, Marley's phone rang. "Quinn, you need to come home. Now." The urgency in his voice cut through everything else. "What happened?" "Just come home, please." She found Quinn standing in the parking lot of their apartment complex, staring at her car. Someone had spray-painted "Liar" across the windshield in red letters 3 feet tall. All 4 tires had been slashed. The side mirror dangled by wires. Marley stood very still, staring at the vandalism, feeling something cold and ancient settle in her chest. This was the cost of fighting, not just legal fees and public scrutiny, but actual violence creeping into the spaces where she lived, where Quinn lived, where they were supposed to be safe. "There's more," Quinn said quietly and led her upstairs. Their apartment door hung slightly ajar, the lock broken. Inside, everything had been destroyed, furniture overturned, dishes smashed, clothes torn from closets and scattered across the floor. On the wall above the couch, someone had spray-painted, "Drop the charges or it gets worse." Quinn stood in the doorway, his face pale. "I came home from school and found it like this. I called the cops, but they said without witnesses or cameras, there's nothing they can do. They suggested we consider whether pursuing legal action was worth the risk to our safety." Marley felt something inside her shift. Not break exactly, transform. The fear that had been gnawing at her edges crystallized into something harder, colder, more useful. Rage. "Pack a bag," she said. "We're leaving." Where are we going? Somewhere safe. And then I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what the Ashford family is willing to do to silence the people they've hurt. Beck's cabin became their refuge. It was small, isolated, and easily defensible, which were the only criteria that mattered. Beck cleared space without being asked, giving Marley his bedroom and taking the couch for himself. Quinn sat up in a corner, with his laptop and homework, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy in a situation that had gone far beyond normal. Sloan arrived that evening with news. I got Ranger released. The judge agreed that holding a certified service dog as evidence was excessive. He's at the vet getting checked over, but you can pick him up tomorrow. Some of the tension left Beck's shoulders. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The Ashfords filed a motion to have your case transferred to a judge in their pocket. I'm fighting it, but the preliminary hearing might get delayed. They're also pushing for a gag order, trying to prevent us from talking to the media about the pattern of abuse. Can they do that? Marley asked. They can try. Whether they succeed depends on the judge. But the fact that they're attempting it tells me they're worried. The unedited video did more damage than they expected. Public opinion is shifting, not completely, but enough that they can't just rely on their usual playbook. Marley pulled out her phone and showed Sloan photos of the vandalized apartment. This happened today. Sloan's expression darkened. Did you file a police report? They said there's nothing they can do. Of course they did. Half the department probably receives donations from Ashford Properties. She took out her own phone and started typing. I'm sending these to a reporter I trust. This crosses a line. Even the Ashfords can't claim that destroying someone's home is acceptable legal strategy. They'll just deny involvement, Beck said. Probably, but it adds to the narrative. Rich family uses intimidation tactics, destroys the lives of people who speak out against them. Every piece of evidence matters, even the circumstantial stuff. That night, Marley lay in Beck's bed, staring at the ceiling of a room that smelled like cedar and gun oil, in the particular loneliness of someone who had learned to live without expecting comfort. Through the thin walls, she could hear Quinn's soft breathing from the living room, the occasional creak as Beck moved on the couch, the eternal whisper of wind through trees. She thought about her parents, about whether they would be proud of what she was doing or horrified by the danger she had brought to their son, about whether fighting for justice was worth the cost when the cost kept climbing higher. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I know what Callahan did to you. He did something similar to me 2 years ago. I never reported it because I was afraid. But if you're really taking him to court, I want to help. My name is Claire Hendricks. Please call me. Marley stared at the message for a long time. Then she forwarded it to Sloan and closed her eyes. The fight was not getting easier, but maybe they were not alone in it after all. The preliminary hearing took place on a gray morning in late March in a courtroom that smelled of old wood and failed hopes. Marley sat at the plaintiff's table with Sloan while Beck occupied the row directly behind them, Ranger pressed against his leg in the certified service dog vest that granted him access. Across the aisle, Callahan Ashford sat with 3 lawyers in suits that cost more than Marley made in a year, his expression carefully neutral. Sterling Ashford occupied the front row of the gallery, surrounded by associates and supporters who had come to demonstrate the family's power through sheer presence. Judge Margaret Hartwell entered and everyone stood. She was in her late 50s with steel gray hair and a reputation for refusing to be intimidated by wealth or influence. Sloan had called her assignment to the case the first piece of actual luck we've had. The hearing began with procedural matters motions and countermotions that meant little to Marley but seemed significant to the lawyers arguing over them. Then came the moment she had been dreading. Your Honor, Sloan said, standing with the calm authority of someone who had practiced this moment in her mind 100 times, we move to introduce evidence of prior bad acts. We have sworn testimony from 3 additional victims of assault by the defendant, establishing a clear pattern of violence enabled by his family's wealth and covered up through legal intimidation. Callahan's lead attorney, a man named Harrison Webb, who looked like he had been born wearing a tie, rose immediately. Objection. These alleged prior acts are inadmissible character evidence. The prosecution is attempting to prejudice the jury with unrelated incidents that have no bearing on the current charges. They're not unrelated, Sloan countered. They demonstrate a pattern of behavior. The defendant has a history of assaulting young women in service positions, then using his father's resources to silence them. This goes directly to motive, intent, and common plan. Judge Hartwell considered this. I'll hear the testimony in chambers first. If I determine it's relevant and not unduly prejudicial, I'll allow it. Ms. Brennan, have your witnesses ready. An hour later, Marley sat in the judge's private chambers while Finley Morrison gave her statement. She described the assault in clinical detail, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She produced medical records, photographs the NDA with Sterling Ashford's signature. When she finished, the room was silent except for the scratch of the court reporter's keys. Bryn went next, showing her scars, describing the party, the cigarette, the lawyers who appeared before she had even decided whether to go to the police. Then Claire Hendricks, the woman who had texted Marley 2 nights before. She was 31, a former hotel employee who had been assaulted by Callahan in an elevator. She had reported it to hotel security only to have the footage mysteriously disappear and her employment quietly terminated with a severance package contingent on silence. 3 women, 3 assaults, 3 cover-ups. The pattern was undeniable. Judge Hartwell looked at Harrison Webb. Does the defense wish to cross-examine? We maintain that these allegations are fabricated, Your Honor. All 3 women have financial motives to lie, and none of them reported their alleged assaults to law enforcement at the time they supposedly occurred. Because they were paid not to, Sloan said sharply, by the defendant's father, using company funds. We have bank records that show transfers from Ashford Properties to all 3 women along with ND, as signed under duress. Judge Hartwell held up a hand. I've heard enough. I'm going to allow this testimony at trial. The pattern is relevant and the probative value outweighs the prejudicial effect. Mr. Webb, your client is facing serious allegations backed by credible evidence. I suggest you consider whether a trial is really in his best interest. It was not an outright victory, but it was close enough that Marley felt something like hope flicker in her chest. They returned to the courtroom. Judge Hartwell announced her decision. Callahan's expression finally cracked, showing something that looked like fear. Sterling Ashford stood abruptly and left the courtroom, his entourage scrambling to follow. Outside, reporters mobbed them, cameras and microphones, and shouted questions that blurred together into white noise. Sloan made a brief statement about justice and accountability. Marley said nothing, just walked through the crowd with her head up and her shoulders back, refusing to let them see how badly she wanted to collapse. They were halfway to Sloan's car when Harrison Webb caught up to them. My client wishes to discuss a settlement. Sloan stopped walking. I thought your client was innocent. Innocent people still have to consider the practical realities of a trial, especially when the judge seems predisposed against them. Judge Hartwell is predisposed toward the truth. If that's a problem for your client, that's not her bias. That's his guilt. Webb's expression tightened. $1 million. Split however you like. All charges dropped, criminal and civil. You walk away and everyone gets to move on with their lives. No, Marley said. Webb looked at her like she had spoken a foreign language. Miss Sinclair, do you understand what you're turning down? That's generational wealth. Life-changing money. All you have to do is let a violent man walk free, let him hurt someone else. Teach my little brother that justice is for sale and the truth doesn't matter as much as money. She shook her head. No, we're going to trial. You'll lose. Even with the judge allowing that testimony, we have resources you can't match. We'll drag this out for years. We'll appeal every ruling. We'll make your life a living hell until you have nothing left to fight with. Beck stepped forward, his presence alone enough to make Webb take a step back. She said, no, I suggest you leave before you make this worse for your client. Webb looked between them, seemed to calculate whether continuing the conversation was worth the risk, and decided it was not. He walked away without another word. Sloan let out a breath. That was either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both, Marley admitted, but it was honest. And right now, that's all I have left. The trial began 3 weeks later on a Monday morning in late April that felt like the culmination of everything Marley had become since that Wednesday in March, when the world tilted and nothing had been the same since. The courthouse was surrounded by protesters, media vans, and people who had simply come to witness what they hoped would be justice. Marley walked through them with Beck on one side and Sloan on the other, Ranger clearing a path with his calm, professional presence. Inside the courtroom was packed. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls, the energy thick with anticipation. Callahan sat at the defense table in a suit that probably cost more than Marley's destroyed car, his hands folded, his expression carefully neutral. But when his eyes met hers across the room, she saw fear there, real fear. And she understood that for all his money and lawyers and family influence, Callahan Ashford was finally facing something he could not buy his way out of. The trial lasted 7 days. Marley testified first, walking through the assault with the same steady voice she had used in the judge's chambers in the police station in every retelling that had carved the memory deeper into her mind. She described Callahan's escalation, his violence, the humiliation of being forced down onto that table in front of a room full of people who did nothing. Harrison Webb tried to rattle her with questions about her finances, her brother's truancy, her desperation. But Sloan had prepared her well, and she answered each question without defensiveness or shame. Yes, I'm in debt. Yes, I'm struggling. But that doesn't make me a liar. It makes me someone who works hard to survive and shouldn't have to suffer assault because a wealthy man couldn't handle being told no. Beck testified next, explaining his intervention with military precision, describing exactly why he acted, how he assessed the threat, why his use of force was measured and appropriate. Webb tried to use his PTSD diagnosis as evidence of instability, but Beck was ready. I have PTSD, I won't deny that, but PTSD doesn't make me violent. It makes me hyper-aware of danger to others. It makes me more likely to intervene, not less. And if the defense wants to argue that veterans with mental health challenges should stay silent when they witness assault, I'd suggest they reconsider what that says about their values. The courtroom rippled with murmurs. Judge Hartwell called for order, but Marley saw approval flicker across her face. Then came Finley Bryn and Claire, one after another, a chorus of voices that painted a picture impossible to ignore. 3 women, 3 assaults, 3 cover-ups. The pattern was overwhelming. The defense called character witnesses for Callahan, friends who said he was kind, business associates who described him as driven, a psychiatrist who diagnosed him with impulse control issues and argued for treatment over punishment. But none of it could erase the evidence Sloan had built. The medical records, the NDAs, the bank transfers, the emails she had obtained through discovery showing Sterling's awareness of his son's behavior, his instructions to handle it quietly, his prioritization of reputation over accountability. On the 7th day, Sloan called her final witness, Sterling Ashford. The courtroom went absolutely silent. Harrison Webb shot to his feet, objecting, but Judge Hartwell overruled. Sterling had been subpoenaed. He had no choice but to testify. Sterling took the stand looking older than his 60 years, the weight of public scrutiny and private guilt visible in every line of his face. He did not look at Callahan. Sloan approached the witness box with the careful focus of a surgeon preparing for a critical incision. Mr. Ashford, how many times have you settled allegations of assault against your son? 7 times over 5 years. And did you believe these allegations were false? A long pause. The courtroom held its breath. No, I knew they were true. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Callahan's face had gone white. Harrison Webb looked like he wanted to object but knew it was too late. You knew your son was assaulting women and you chose to pay them for silence rather than get him help or turn him over to authorities. Is that correct? Yes. Why? Sterling's hands gripped the armrests of the witness chair. Because I thought I was protecting him. Because I believed that our family's reputation mattered more than the pain of strangers. Because I was a coward who chose the easy path over the right one. Are you protecting him now? No, I can't anymore. I won't anymore. What my son did to these women, what I enabled by covering it up, it's unforgivable. And if testifying here helps ensure he faces real consequences, helps ensure that no other family can use money to cover up violence, then that's the only worthwhile thing I'll have done since this began. Sloan nodded slowly. No further questions. Harrison Webb declined to cross-examine. What could he possibly ask that would undo a father publicly condemning his own son, Sterling, stepped down from the witness stand? As he passed the defense table, he paused for just a moment, looking at Callahan, with an expression that combined sorrow and resignation, and something that might have been love twisted into an unrecognizable shape. Then he walked out of the courtroom, leaving his son to face justice alone. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict with a voice that carried to every corner of the silent courtroom. On the charge of assault in the 2nd degree, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. Marley felt Sloan's hand grip her arm, heard Beck's quiet exhalation beside her, but across the aisle, Callahan stared straight ahead, his expression blank, while Harrison Webb frantically scribbled notes about appeals and motions. Judge Hartwell called for order, then looked at Callahan with an expression that contained no sympathy. Mr. Ashford, you have been found guilty of a violent crime committed with full knowledge and intent. Your wealth and your family's influence protected you for years, allowed you to hurt multiple people without consequence. That ends today. She paused, letting the words settle. I'm sentencing you to 5 years in state prison with mandatory substance abuse and anger management treatment. Upon release, you will complete 500 hours of community service working with organizations that support assault survivors. You will also be placed on the sex offender registry as someone convicted of assault with a pattern of targeting vulnerable individuals. Callahan's composure finally shattered. He made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Judge Hartwell continued. Additionally, I'm recommending that the district attorney investigate Sterling Ashford for obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and conspiracy to conceal criminal activity. Wealth does not grant immunity from the law, and those who use it to enable violence must face consequences. The gavel fell. It was over. 4 months later, on a warm August evening, Marley stood in front of the Speak Up Foundation office, watching the sun paint the Nashville sky in shades of orange and gold. The storefront was small, tucked between a coffee shop and a vintage clothing store in East Nashville, but it represented something that had not existed before. A place where survivors could come for legal help, counseling, referrals, and the simple assurance that they were not alone. The settlement from the civil suit against Sterling Ashford had provided the funding. $500,000 awarded not just to Marley, but divided among all of Callahan's victims. It was not enough to erase what had been done to them, but it was enough to build something that might prevent it from happening to others. Beck approached with Ranger at his side, the dog's tail wagging in the easy contentment of an animal who understood that his human was healing. Beck had started a service dog training program, expanding from Ranger to a full kennel of dogs being prepared for veterans struggling with PTSD. The work gave him purpose beyond his own pain. "You ready?" he asked. "I think so." Sloan emerged from inside the office carrying a box of business cards fresh from the printer. She had left her corporate firm to run the foundation full-time, taking a massive pay cut and gaining something that money could not measure. Redemption, maybe? Or just the satisfaction of using her skills for something that mattered. Finley and Bryn were there too, both now advocates who spoke at schools and community centers about recognizing abuse and finding the courage to report it. They had transformed their pain into purpose, their silence into strength. Quinn had started college at Nashville State on a full scholarship studying social work. He still did not talk much about those months when his sister had become a national story, but last week he had asked to volunteer at the foundation on weekends. "Someone has to answer phones," he'd said with studied casualness. But Marley had seen the truth in his eyes. Her little brother, who had once been ashamed of the attention, now wanted to be part of what she was building. Lenora had come to the foundation's opening that morning, bringing trays of cinnamon rolls from Redwood Diner. She had pulled Marley aside and pressed an envelope into her hands. Inside was a check for $5,000. "For the foundation," Lenora had said when Marley tried to refuse. "You saved my diner, honey. Let me help you save someone else." They had hugged, and Marley had felt the weight of everything they had been through together. The fear, the pressure, the moment when Lenora had to choose between protecting her business and protecting her employee. She had chosen wrong briefly, but she had spent every day since making it right. Now, as the last light faded from the sky, Marley's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I saw your interview on the news. I think something similar happened to me last year. Can you help? I'm scared to come forward alone." Marley showed the message to Beck. "Another one," he said quietly. "Yeah." She typed a response, her fingers steady on the screen. "Yes. Come to the Speak Up Foundation office tomorrow at 10. Bring anyone you trust. You won't be alone. We'll figure this out together." She sent the message and looked up at the people gathered around her. These strangers who had become family, bound together by trauma and the choice to refuse silence. "We can't save everyone," she said. "No," Beck agreed, "but we can save some, and we can make sure they know they're not alone. Sometimes that has to be enough." Marley thought about the woman she had been 4 months ago, the waitress who had believed the world was fundamentally unfair, and that survival meant accepting it. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who knew the world was unfair but believed it could be changed. The transformation had cost her everything familiar. Her job, her apartment, her illusion of safety. Some nights she still woke up feeling someone's hand on the back of her head, still felt the table's edge against her cheekbone, still heard the sound of glass shattering. But it had also given her something she had not known she was missing. Purpose, community. The knowledge that she was capable of more than just enduring. They walked inside together, Ranger between them, and turned on the lights. The office glowed warm and welcoming in the gathering darkness. A beacon for anyone who needed it. Because the fight was not over. It would never really be over. There would always be more Callahans, more Sterlings, more systems designed to protect the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. But there would also be more people like Marley, like Beck, like Finley and Bryn and Claire and all the others who decided that silence was not safety and that justice was worth fighting for even when the odds seemed impossible. Somewhere across Nashville in a minimum security facility, Callahan Ashford sat in his cell. He had written the apology letters his therapist suggested, started treatment, begun the long process of understanding that consequences were real. Whether he would truly change remained to be seen. But for the first time in his life, he was being forced to try. And in her office in East Nashville, Marley Sinclair prepared to help another survivor find their voice, another person caught in the machinery of a system designed to silence them. She did not know if she would live to see the day when justice was not something you had to fight for, but something you could simply expect. But she would spend the rest of her life working toward it, one person at a time, one story at a time, one moment of courage at a time, until the world changed, or until she did. And in the end, maybe those were the same thing. The phone rang again. Another survivor, another story, another chance to prove that speaking up mattered, that the truth could survive even when powerful people tried to bury it. Marley answered, "Speak Up Foundation. You're not alone. Tell me what happened." And in the simple act of listening, of believing, of refusing to let another voice be silenced, she found the thing that had eluded her for so long. Not happiness exactly, not peace, but something close to both. The knowledge that she had taken the worst moment of her life and transformed it into something that mattered. That she had refused to let cruelty have the final word. That she had stood up when it would have been easier to stay down. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.